can't believe that worked. Hopefully,
That worked.
hopefully that video is going to save correctly because there was so much good stuff on it. We'll keep our fingers crossed. Uh,
Okay, fingers crossed.
just so now that we're here, this is Jennie Love, everybody. She has Love and Fresh Flower Farm in Philadelphia, PA. Amazing. We've been touring just your amazing property and everything you've done. We were talking about no-till flower farming, which I love the idea that tillers can become yard art.
Yes, yes.
So,
That gives me a great idea. I should get an artist to put a mural on my tiller and then
exactly.
put it on a pedestal.
I know, it can be for archaeologists, 1,000 years from now.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
no, I was so excited to hear. I know I still have the note in my notebook because when we were doing your interview, you mentioned it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like a whole episode all by itself. And I know we don't have time to get into it all now, but I'm so glad to hear about it. And I have done a little more research on this topic, and I know there's some resources available. I think that this is think of the labor you save. Think of the money you save, not spraying chemicals or fungicides.
So much.
Or I don't know, just there's so many benefits to it. I knew there had to be benefits to it. So my grandfather had a farm. It's like 80 acres. And my uncle now runs it. And my uncle is not into organic farming at all, which makes me sad. But when I was up at the farm the last time, I was shocked that he was practicing no-till agriculture. And
awesome.
I thought, I'm like, okay, there's hope here. Okay. That was great. Yeah. And the thing that I thought was so amazing was, the difference in yield. And so he did mention to me at the time that the yield is sometimes different for the first couple years for him. But then that third year, it was like explosion. Is that the same way with flowers or?
It yes and no.
Okay.
So there's certain crops that did not love the first season that we did it because I think it was such a stark transition from what we had been doing to what there was still. So it might help if I'm going to switch this around and show you how we make beds.
Okay. Because that was a question I was wondering too. When you go to put all that hay and leaves on the dahlias, the tarp keeps it from blowing away. The tarp keeps it from washing away, I guess.
Yes, yeah. And the tarp really is to stop rain. So that's the number one reason. Dahlias won't overwinter if they're wet. They'll rot out if they're wet and cold. So the tarp is really more for the rain. But in this situation, so this is a bed of basil. Currently it's Thai basil, which we use for cut flowers. Actually, I love the flowers of Thai basil, and they have such an amazing fragrance, FYI.
I love it. Yeah.
But this is a good bed to show you what we do. So what I adopted when I adopted no-till farming is what's called the deep mulching system, which is similar to lasagna gardening, if people watching know what lasagna gardening is. So it meant that before we established a bed, so under there's the bed, but we put a layer of cardboard down. So this is a thin ply corrugated cardboard. So we roll that out on the bed. It's a 36-inch wide roll of cardboard that we use now. And so we lay that out, and then in the first couple of seasons, so this bed that we're looking at right now, this is its third season in no-till. And so it's starting to come around to like what exactly we want it to be. But when I first started, I would have to put down 3 to 4 inches of compost. So this on top of the bed, this is all compost. This isn't soil, this is compost. And so you put the cardboard serves to stop weeds. And then the compost is to create a good planting medium and to conserve moisture. And then you plant the plants through the cardboard. You stick your finger through the cardboard and plant into the soil below. So I don't know if you can see, but I was able to just stick my finger in there. Through. And it's just like super soft and gorgeous loamy soil. But that didn't happen the first year. The first year of no-till, my soil was super compacted from having been tilled for so many years. So the irony of tilling is that tilling actually compacts the soil, and it causes serious issues with soil structure. So I always, for whatever reason, because I was raised as a conventional farmer, thought that you needed to till to break open the ground. Like the only way to plant was to break the ground in the spring because it's like hard and you have to break it. Well, it turns out it's only hard because you've been tilling it. So that was like a rewiring of my brain that I really had to work on. But now I'm like such a believer. So now my soil without tilling is way more what they call friable and loamy, and it has gorgeous aggregates in it that it never had when it was tilled. So that's the difference. But the first season, it takes a while for your whole ecosystem, the soil ecosystem, to regenerate, to wake up, basically, because when you're tilling, I heard somebody, and now I'm going to be a bad person and steal somebody's analogy without remembering where to give credit. So forgive me. I think it might have been Gabe Brown, who is the author of Dirt to Soil. It's an amazing book. Highly recommend it, especially for your uncle. It might be a good book for him to read
Yeah.
because Gabe Brown is a rancher, a big thousands of acres rancher, and he's done no-till for years. But anyway, the analogy was it's like having New York City buzzing along, like your soil is like New York City down there. It's got subways, it's got sewer systems, it's got electric lines, it's got skyscrapers, it's got, you know, theaters, I don't know, whatever. Just imagine the buzzing, intensity of New York City. And then Godzilla comes through, and Godzilla rips up the sewer systems and smashes in the
I love
subway,
this.
and it's so that's what a tiller does. It takes this amazing functional network, and then you just rip through it, and you just kill it. Maybe the microbes can run away from the tiller, but ultimately you've ruined their entire infrastructure. So it takes a couple seasons for that infrastructure to come back, and that's why the first season into no-till, I hear a lot of horror stories about the first season into no-till, how it's like it's really hard and oh my gosh, and just hold in there. But I didn't have any of that. I thought it was amazing from the very get-go. I've just been in love with all of it. But now that my soil structure is better, what's happening is we don't have to put down so much compost, and so there's not as much of a lasagna effect, which is what was the real problem in the beginning. Was that lasagna effect was sort of shedding water instead of letting it get down into the soil.
Right.
It was creating some issues. So now it's not
Excuse me.
nearly as bad as it was. So, but it does. It takes a few seasons. So this is my third season of no-till, and I'm noticing like just phenomenal changes in my whole farm. And it just feels alive. It feels so alive out here. The ground is spongy when you walk on it. There's just so much life. It just feels so much better to be out here. So that's really what's driving me these days as a farmer, to say the
Right.
least.
Well,
Yeah,
I love it because, well, I love it for a lot of reasons. I mean, people don't realize I mean, soil, we all think of soil as something you get, in a bag somewhere. But
yeah,
what they
yeah,
don't realize is it's really a living, it's like your description of New York City is perfect
yeah,
because
yeah,
it's living. There's things living in it that perform, break down organic matter so your plants can
yeah,
get nutrients. There's worms that
yeah,
aerate the soil for you.
yeah.
There's just
All of
a
that.
million things,
Yeah,
and I know I'm guilty of doing tilling, and I tried doing it, but we have another issue with our property that we had to kind of stop altogether just because of some flooding issues, and so they rerouted. And this long story, but
yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
but no, I've studied this a little bit enough to know there's so it's the benefits, you can't even put a dollar value on it.
You really can't.
And
And you said it earlier. You said it earlier too, like all the cost savings. So one of the things that I have been floored by most in discovering more and more about no-till is that, like I said before, I got into it sort of out of necessity. I literally couldn't till my soil. Like it was just too wet. But then what I discovered is along the way that we can flip beds in such a more efficient manner. So maybe it'll be easier if I turn this around again and I show you kind of what I mean. So before, when I was tilling, I
uh-huh.
would have to wait for this entire bed to finish production. And then we'd have to clear the entire bed. We would have to take out all the plant material in it. We'd have to lift up those lines of irrigation that are there. We'd have to like strip everything out, and we'd have to do it one bed at a time. Like it'd have to be an entire bed because my tiller was hooked to a tractor, which the only way to get the tractor through here was to drive it on these aisles. So I had to do all of that work to flip a bed. Now, instead, when I want to flip a crop, I'm focusing on a crop. So instead, it'll be like, okay, so this basil, actually, maybe I can actually show you guys a real,
Your
a real
signal's kind of
scenario.
coming in,
Right. Oh,
Jenny.
sorry.
Yeah, your signal's
Okay.
coming in, just a little bit, just to let you know.
All right. I'm going to back up. I
I'm
might be
sorry.
hitting a dead spot. No, no, it's okay.
I was so
So
into
I'll just
this, but then that
continue.
happened.
Yeah. So, but the point is that now instead of having to clear this entire bed, we can leave the drip tape in place. We can just do one small section of the crop. So that means we can maximize each crop for as long as it makes sense for it to be in there. Or if something wasn't healthy and it just doesn't make sense to keep it, we can rip it out. But now I can treat each bed as like small little modulars instead of one giant modular,
Wow.
which makes bed flip so much easier and faster. So this whole field is like exponentially more productive because it's not just that I'm not tilling, but it's also just the way I can manage the space now. Hopefully that makes sense. But
Oh, it does.
it's really fantastic how
It's
much
like
of
you
a
almost
difference.
have no downtime.
Right, there's no downtime, and my crew can now just go through and instead of waiting for me, I don't know if you've ever had to hook up any implement to the back of a tractor, but trust me, it is like the biggest pain in the
Yeah.
beep. So it can take, it seems so simple. Like, how hard can it be to put a tiller on a tractor? But then you try to do it, and it can take you, like, on a good day, I can get it on in like 10, 15 minutes. I could get it on and be rolling. On a bad day, it could be 3 hours later, and I still haven't gotten the stupid thing to work. Like, it just, I don't know, it has its own mind. So there was a lot of like, waste of time in that capacity. My crew had to wait for me. So now it's like they can in there, they can plant this one piece of space, and everything's just rolling constantly. So it took a long time for me to get used to that, actually, to
Sure.
prep for that. So yeah,
Well, let
and
me.
then also, oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say one other thing is to just talk about spacing. Oh man, I'm not allowed to go there. I keep trying to not hit the dead spots. I actually don't know if I get a good example down here, but we do 4-inch spacing with our plants now, which is crazy tight. But we can do it at 4-inch spacing because the soil is so healthy now. And so because of that, we used to plant at 8 to 12-inch spacing. And now that we can basically double the spacing. So we have things like super, super tight spacing.
Is
And
that
that means
Lizzie?
I'm producing, yep, that's Lizzie. Yep. So I'm producing so much more in the small amount of space than I was. By the way, this is cattle panel or handy panel, this metal stuff. This is what we use instead of Hort Nova netting.
Is it bent
Because,
over the sides so that way it
yep,
stands
it's
on its
bent.
own?
Yeah, let's see if I can get it to like show you. Do
Yeah.
you see
Wow.
that?
I love
Yeah, so
that.
it's I learned this trick from a bunch of other older farmers or more seasoned farmers. And they taught me this trick through the ASCFG.
Yay. No, we need to. We
um,
got to talk about them. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, and then one other thing, because, this is my driving passion anymore, if you'll bear with me,
Sure.
is this year I trialed some intercropping. So I don't know if it'll show up.
Radishes.
Oh, we're back. This is
Radishes.
Lisianthus, and then inside there, I intercropped with radishes. Yep, so these are radishes that I was growing just to take up space, to not to eat, though they're delicious.
Yeah.
But this really helped with weed management. And so we didn't have nearly as many weeds in this bed because weeds are just nature trying to fill in space. So because of the radishes being in there weren't nearly as many weeds. And now I'm leaving the radishes in. We cut the tops off, but I'm leaving the radishes in so that the radishes will decompose in there. And during the decomposition, they will draw worms up, like worms will come to eat the decomposing matter. And also the roots of radishes or any root crop tend to draw minerals from deep in the soil. They take minerals that are further down than my Lisianthus can get to. So my Lisianthus have very small root systems. I don't know if you've grown Lisianthus.
Yeah.
They suck at roots.
Yeah.
so so they have a hard time collecting nutrients. But these radishes were able to draw up a lot of minerals that the Lisianthus didn't have access to, and those minerals are now stored in the root of the radish. And as the radish itself deteriorates and decomposes, it will release those minerals to the root system of the Lisianthus. So that's like an example of not just no-till, but of thinking about the soil as a living system that needs farming itself. Or I don't even like using the word farming, but stewarding or I don't know. I'm just like the shepherdess of this place or something. But the idea is my true my true work as a farmer, as a regenerative farmer, is to think first about the soil and how to access the soil and take care of the soil, and then I get good crops as a result. Those are the best Lisianthus I've ever had, ever, hands down. And we haven't had to weed them. We weeded one time, but like they're just phenomenal. They're so healthy and so happy because I started thinking more holistically than just being like, I'm growing Lisianthus and that's what I do. So,
Amazing.
yeah,
Well, I
so
got a
that's
bunch of
something to say.
questions, so
Okay.
let's kind of plow through them. You know, somebody asked
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
So if the questions I'm asking were on the last live, so I wrote them
Okay.
down to carry them
Great.
over. So if you
Great.
have more questions, we will be happy to entertain them as long as Jenny's arm will hold out. And
I
so
know my arm's getting really tired, so I'm gonna flip so I don't have to hold my arm up so
that's
hard.
fine. That's fine. So,
Okay.
yeah, we know you're there, so it's all good. So,
Okay. All right.
one of the questions was grass. What type of grass do you have between your rows?
Oh
Um,
yeah. It is just sorry, my cat's being weird. I'm distracted by my cat. The grass is it's just grass. Like it's not I didn't try to do anything special. I originally seeded my aisles with clover, and some of the aisles have kept their clover better than other aisles. But in here where we're looking right now, that's just whatever grass showed up on its own accord.
oh,
But we
okay.
do mow. I use a mulching push mower, a 21-inch wide mulching, and the key here is mulching
Right.
push mower. And we just mow every Thursday. It's like on the list, and it just gets done every Thursday. And as a result, it's super easy. I don't do it anymore. I used to do it myself, but now, now Allison, who works for me, does it. And it takes her, like 20 minutes to mow all the aisles in the field. So it's really not bad. It seems like it might be, but it's really easy. And then the other field, try not to make you all dizzy, but in case that question was referring to the Woody's field over there, that tall, light tan colored is winter rye. So it was first seeded last fall, and it's a winter rye that grew all winter, and now it's in seed head. And it's going to drop its seed any day now. And I'm just leaving it up there because it's great for bird habitat and then sheltering the small
Right.
plants.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
then when it drops its seed, I'll go through and I'll mow it down. So it'll be time for a new one. Yeah.
That's awesome. One person asked about your greenhouses. Were they
Sure.
heated or are they cold frames?
Nope, they are just what would be considered cold frames, no heat. I used to have a heated house, not here, but at another location. This is one of my, this has been a traveling circus a few times over the course of its lifetime. So I used to have a heated greenhouse space, and then when I moved out of that space, I considered putting heat in one of these houses, which they could, with a little extra work, they could turn into heated houses. But I decided that I don't want to grow through the winter. I'm not going to be an all year round grower. I need a break, frankly.
Sure. Sure.
And B, I'm not sure how I feel about heated greenhouse space in terms of sustainability. My brain is still torn over the value of heated greenhouse space. So instead I turn my cooler into a germination chamber during the winter. So that's where I start the seeds. And then they move into that house over there, has a funny little mini greenhouse inside of it, plastic. You can kind of see it from here. I could walk down there if it's important. So it's a mini greenhouse inside of a greenhouse, totally homemade. And that has heat mats under that secondary set of plastic. And that keeps it warm enough that they're fine in there. I start seeds in February. As long as they don't freeze, they're fine. So I like that system better. I feel more comfortable with that system, basically. So, yeah.
Well, we had a question about the metal netting, which I think you just answered a few minutes ago about it's called cattle fencing.
It can be called either cattle panel or handy panel. I've seen it listed as both things. I get mine at the chain called Tractor Supply. I think that's a nationwide chain.
Yeah, we have
So
that.
you can get it there for $15 a panel, and then it lasts a lifetime. So I just add maybe 8 or 9 panels a year because they're kind of a pain in the butt to bend. That's the one the one issue. So I just add a few every season while I can manage it. And then I just keep building up my supply of them. So yeah, they're great. Yeah.
Okay, so I was curious. Do you get a lot of burn back with the eucalyptus since that house doesn't have any heat source, or does it just manage to keep the edge off?
Yeah, it keeps the edge off. And in fact, I'll show you my. We grow eucalyptus out in the field, and it's grown as an annual, but then I managed to overwinter some of it last year just out in the field by putting a thick layer of straw over it. And then, so this is all eucalyptus in this row. So this is eucalyptus that overwintered, but you can see it's much smaller out in the field than it is in the hoop house. And so in the hoop house, we cut it back to the ground actually. So it's not actively growing through the winter. And then all of that growth that you saw in there was growth that happened this spring. So it grows like a weed once it's established. It wants to be a tree. So that's why it's so big.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's incredible. Okay, so let's see the questions. So someone made the comment, the radish and the Lisianthus, like that they help with compaction.
Yeah, so there's a kind of radish called a tillage radish, which I chose not to use. So a tillage radish is a type of radish that it's a daikon radish, one of those super long, like looks like a carrot kind of. I did not use the tillage radish, but I used just truly your straight basic red eating radish. Because I didn't want the roots to get too big and disturb the Lisianthus. So I was looking more for a very quick growing root crop that was easy to terminate. So terminate meaning kill it, so that it wouldn't outcompete my Lisianthus once they got to the stage that they're at now, but it would create canopy over the bed while the Lisianthus were still so small. Lisianthus grow at a snail's pace at the best of times.
Right.
So it was good. The radishes really helped to shade out the weeds, basically. So, Yeah.
Okay, so because Lisianthus, and that was I'm glad to hear that you didn't pull the radishes or just like topping them off and letting them do their thing, because I think Lisianthus can be very finicky with their roots, and you do a lot of disrupting. You're liable to lose some. So
exactly. And they were one of those crops that really hated. You asked me earlier, about like going very low, so we'll last as long as we last.
I'm sorry.
But no, it's okay. So Lisianthus did not like no-till at all the first season that I did it. And I think that was because it didn't like that the cardboard and the compost and the layering effect, because they have such a wimpy root system.
Right.
So it really took me a while to figure out the the sort of formula for Lisianthus and no-till, but I think I've got it nailed down now. And I have a blog post drafted specifically about that. So hopefully that will go up shortly and I
It's
can
all
write it
good.
out. Yeah.
All right. So, as far as how do you bend the cattle panels?
Yeah, it's funny. I should try to do a video of that at some time. It's hard to explain. But it's actually super simple. It involves laying the cattle panel on a grassy surface, um, and then using a couple cinder blocks and a 2x4. And so the cinder blocks are there to weight down the cattle panel so it won't slide. And then the 2x4 is sort of the guideline for the bend, so to speak.
Oh,
And I
okay.
just step on the 2x4 to keep it in place. And then I just use my muscle to bend back the edge. So it's really not very technical, to be
Sure.
honest.
Well,
Yeah.
not everything has to be, thankfully. Isn't that
No,
good?
it just takes some muscle, and that is the reason I don't have more of them, is because I do like 4, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm good for the day.
I get it. Totally.
That's funny.
Um,
Yeah.
I remember a question that was on the last session.
Yeah.
Employees, how many people work for you?
Oh, yeah. So that's always fun to talk about. So currently, I only have 2 part-time employees. I'm doing all of this myself plus 2 part-time employees. So current staffing is 36 combined hours for the week. So each week I have 36 hours of help with this farm. And that's on purpose. Well, it's not on purpose. It's COVID kept me from bringing a third person on, which I normally have 3 people, almost always women for whatever reason.
Right.
And so I will have 3 people usually each season that work a total of 48 hours combined. And that's right where I like to have it. I've had a crew of up to 8 in the past.
Wow.
And I found out that I was managing them and they're just managing them. Is a polite way of saying it. Instead of getting the work done. So we've got a helicopter overhead. Sorry if you can hear it. So now I just prefer to put in longer days myself and not have to worry about drama. 8 women together is usually tough. But as a result, that's one thing. Another testament to no-till is that
Absolutely.
I I am working less this season, even though I'm working more. This is complicated, but I have 1 less crew member, but I'm still doing less manual labor than I normally do because this is so much easier than it ever was before. So,
I love everything
um,
about that.
yeah, yeah. So it really works out.
Well, I know we had someone who kind of tuned in late, and I don't know if they're still with us.
Yeah,
But of course, we were talking about no-till flower farming at the very beginning because we were left off from our previous live. But she asked the question, which I thought was interesting, and I feel like maybe people might be curious. Do
yeah.
you even fork the beds for aeration or
No,
anything? Nothing.
nope. I don't do anything.
Good.
Nope. It is just year over year we add another thin layer of cardboard. I continue to use the cardboard, though I'm not totally sure I love the cardboard, but it does definitely keep the weeds down. But then, yeah, just fresh compost on top. And I've heard conversations, by the way, I'm going for my phone charger in case I die. So, but I've heard other growers talk about their concerns about bed compaction with no-till, but um, I have not experienced that yet myself at all. And I think the reason compaction happens is because, oh, are you guys still there? I can't see you guys.
You're pausing, so you're probably. I can hear you.
Yep, maybe.
There you are.
Oh, okay. um, I think one of the good is about compact, they have their surfaces exposed, their soil is exposed to this. And so rain will compact the soil. Rain itself is a form of
Right.
heating up the soil in some ways. So by having the thick layer of mulch, I'm not noticing any sort of compaction whatsoever in my soil, because I think that's like a nice covering to keep it from getting compacted. So yeah, for what it's worth,
Plus,
that's my thoughts at
plus
least.
that rain also helps leach in organic matter into your
Yeah,
soil, which
yeah,
also
exactly.
helps slow that process or stop that
Yeah,
process. So,
right.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's there's little nuances to it, and we're not trying to oversimplify it,
No, no.
but it
You
is.
definitely have to learn.
It's not complicated. I mean, it's not rocket science, but at the
No.
same, but it makes such a difference. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
okay,
And it's
so
also, I don't want people to ever be discouraged thinking that it's going to be a lot of work, that you do have to fork or anything. I mean, maybe you will have to fork. I don't know. I can't say
right.
for sure for any given person, but I can say that it's worth starting. Like if that's somehow scaring anybody, that should not scare you away from this. I would gladly go out there and fork those beds at this point, because it's so worth the change that I've witnessed. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, I know that you have been so gracious. I mean, I can't believe we've been doing this now for an hour and a half.
I know. I
It's
told you I could talk.
well, it's such great information, and I love everyone's questions. And this is all good. And again, if you haven't heard our episode with Jennie this week, please go listen. You get more of this great stuff. That if you've enjoyed this at all, I two things. One, how rotation, like if you have crop rotation, like with the annuals and things like that, do you move things around, from season to season,
Yeah,
or yeah?
right. That's a really good question. So yes and no. It happens naturally the way I'm farming. When I was tilling, I would, I had this whole field map, and I was super like organized about it, and really worried about the placement of everything. But now, since I've gone into no tilling, one of the best pieces of advice I heard, and now I'm going to do it again, Scott, where I forget who I
Okay.
heard it from. But anyway, some other guru of no till was talking about how they didn't even bother field mapping anymore, because
Really?
now, instead of trying to super control the space, you have a more intuitive observer's approach to farming. So you can look at a bed and say, this crop really isn't doing that well. It's got a lot of pests on it. So, by the way, pests are attracted to unhealthy plants. If your plants are really healthy, they're not attracted to them. So growers who sort of beat up pests are just, betting on a dying horse anyway. The plants are no good. So instead, you might just be better off ripping out the crop, which is clearly unhealthy, or think about how can I make this crop healthier, not worry about spraying all the pests. So anyway, that's all to say that if wait, actually, I totally lost my train of thought.
Well, I'll jump in here
What
because
was the question, Scott?
when I was at University of Georgia, and I was taking the very difficult, but I love this course, plant nutrition.
Yeah,
People don't realize that, and that's a great point. If you're seeing a lot of pest pressure on your plants, and you think your plants are healthy, you might take a second look at them.
yeah,
There may be some
absolutely.
nutritional, situation
Yeah,
going on, or some environmental
right.
situation going on.
Yep,
And it's definitely worth taking a second look, a deeper look. Maybe get your soil tested. You
yep,
know,
exactly.
it could be a difference in your pH being slightly off, so therefore the plants aren't getting nutrition that they
Yep,
normally would have access to.
yep.
And so anyway, I just jump in there and say that's a
No,
great
yeah.
point. I'm glad you brought that up.
I love it. Yeah, exactly. And a lot of times micronutrients are a big issue. So it'll be something like
Right.
boron or calcium, something that's not going to show up in a soil test. And this is why reading some of these books that I've read have been so mind blowing to me. I thought I was a really good farmer before all of this. And I didn't I don't know. I wasn't that observant before in my farming career. I was just going at it like you know, hit it. I had a hammer, and I thought farming was a nail, and that was all there was to it. Hit the nail with the hammer, and that's what I was supposed to do. But it turns out it's so much more nuanced than that. There's so many more layers to it, and it's been such a learning curve. I don't even know the half of it yet. I probably don't even know 1/1000th of it yet, what I'm supposed to do. But that does remind me that your question was more to, do I rotate crops? And the advice that I had gotten was to be more of an observer and to not have this like rigid field map in mind where I'm going to rotate this and this plugs in here and that has to go over there. But instead say like, hey, that crop doesn't look healthy. Maybe it's just time to abandon that and put something else in there. And just sort of, there's a flow to it. So instead of worrying
Sure.
about the super rigid like rotation, now everything's rotating naturally on its own accord. So I'm not planning out a field map anymore, which is highly liberating and also time saving. So there's another way that no-till has really helped me save money by saving time, you know, is to be able to just plug and play. The one thing I do rotate religiously is tulips, and I think that's really, really important for any growers watching. You have to rotate your tulips. You really, really do, because they get fire blight, and then you're going to lose your entire crop of tulips. So make sure they're in fresh soil or median, whatever you're growing them in, every year. That's the one thing I'm religious about.
Okay. Okay. So another question. I know we have a couple questions below, but I want to make sure the starting your plants. Do you do fall like plantings, or do your successions naturally take you? Like, when does your season officially end since you don't grow through the winter?
Well, it doesn't officially end. We are growing through the winter, but we're not producing through the winter.
Okay.
So the hoop house, one of the hoop houses is still that hoop house with the flowers in it right now, is in production through the winter. I'm just not trying to produce flowers. But anyway, to answer the point, successions, like we plant seeds every week of the year except the week of Christmas. So there's always something being
Oh,
sown
really?
yeah. So it just, you know, it depends on what time of the year. But so we're sowing a lot of stuff right now for the end of summer. So we're still sowing for 2020 at the moment. But come August 1st, we're going to switch to sowing for 2021. And so that'll be things like cool annuals, a great book by Lisa Ziegler called Cool Flowers. If
Right.
anybody doesn't understand the concept of cool annuals, you can sow stuff right now, or well, on August, that you will plant in the field in the fall, and then you'll have early spring blooms. So those include larkspur and nigella and bachelor buttons and dianthus and snapdragons and
Yeah.
other things. Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, so we're sowing all the time.
Okay. Somebody asked a question about, you put compost on everything because of your no-till and everything else. Do you put additional fertilizers of any kind on the field?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so we used to. I also am now trying a different approach. So thanks to reading Gabe Brown's book, Dirt to Soil, I started really rethinking how human of it is of me to influence the soil structure through adding lots of stuff to the soil. So you'd have to read his book to better understand what I'm saying. But the concept is that we try to force our will on soil health and life. And instead, the reality is, and that makes for, it's like feeding junk food to your kids. Like, yeah, it feeds them, but they're going to grow up, you know, lazy and obese probably. I don't know. I don't have kids. So instead of, you know, giving your plants this like easy fast food, maybe instead focus on the ecosystem of your soil and let, you know, nobody is out in the forest fertilizing anything. You know, like the forest
Really?
is taking care of itself. Yeah. So that's like a testament to like, hey, nature knows how to feed herself. We just need to respect what nature's doing. So
Get out
I've
of the
really
way.
committed to, yeah, get out of the way, basically. So I've committed to not adding things to the soil, because I don't want to mess with the soil life down there. Even though it might have been an organic amendment, it would always be organic. We've always only used organic stuff.
Right.
But say one of my favorite things to add was cottonseed meal for nitrogen.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, okay, that adds nitrogen, but what's that do? Like, I don't know how like the pill bugs respond to cottonseed meal. Maybe that like really screws them up or something. You know, like I don't know what it does. It might not kill things, but it might really impact the way they function in the soil. So I don't add anything to the soil anymore, but we do fertilize by spraying, foliar feeding. So with a backpack sprayer, I foliar feed once a week in the field, and the mix of what I'm feeding the crops is dependent on their life cycle. So it's not just a blanket, I put this on my plants, but it changes literally by the week. The amount of certain things that I'm putting in that mix of stuff changes every week depending on whether it's a young plant that needs lots of nitrogen to increase its leaf growth, or if it's a plant coming into bud, I want to put a lot of phosphorus into it. You know, so it's just a changing. It's that staying in tune with nutrition, and not just going like, hey, I'm putting Miracle Grow on my plants.
Yeah.
Would never put Miracle Grow on my plants,
No.
ever.
No, I get that. Well, I see a question on here about dahlias, and what I want to do is say, Sharon, thank you for your question. Our first video, which I haven't tagged and done all the fancy stuff to, but should be on my Instagram, hopefully. If you can go watch that, then she really talks a lot about the dahlia propagation, but all of her dahlias have been perennialized, so she's not digging them regularly. So I have two more questions. We're going to make these the last two questions because
Okay.
You
We're
have
gonna run out of
been
time.
you have been gracious and generous, and I bless you. So let's see what the first one is here.
Okay. Well, I'm passionate about this, so I'm glad everybody's willing to listen. This is so important in my mind to get people to understand.
I totally agree. Okay, so it looks like we have a multiple situation question here. Can you add the cardboard and compost anytime after the growing season, winter, early spring? As it goes on here.
Okay.
Early spring, when planting with the cardboard down, do you bust through the cardboard? You showed us where you do bust through the cardboard to plant. And then, okay, so I've gotten these out of order because this was a really long question.
That's okay.
But yeah, the bottom line is, can you put the cardboard down anytime? Or do you just do that when you initially are starting it?
We might get into, I don't know how much time we have left, so I'll try to make this short. But this kind of goes into another important piece of regenerative farming, which couples with no-till, is that you should have living roots in your soil as much as possible. Your soil should not be without living roots, if at all possible.
Okay.
So that the reason for that is there's a symbiotic relationship between the microbes, all that life. New York City under the ground needs New York City on top of the ground to feed it. So if you take away the living root system, then you are starving your soil life. And so because of that, I never anymore leave bare soil. So I don't know if you probably didn't notice it out there in my tour, but there's not a single lick of bare vacant ground at this point. And the reason for that is that I want those living roots in there at all times. So to answer this question, Alyssa's question, no, I don't put the cardboard down until I'm ready to plant into it. So the day that we're going to create a bed for the season, the bed will have been in cover crop through the winter. So usually a mix of winter rye, vetch, cowpeas, clover. There's a bunch of different things I use. But it'll have been a living root system all winter. And then when I want to use the bed, what we do is I take that mulching mower, that mulching push mower that I talked about, and I just mow down the cover crop as low as I can. I scalp it basically with the mower. And then we immediately go back and lay the cardboard then and put the compost on top and plant the same day.
Really?
The very same day, yes. And this is really important because what's happened is you've got this whole beautiful network of living roots already in the soil from your cover crop that you just terminated by mowing it down.
Okay.
And so this gorgeous network of roots has established an equally gorgeous network of symbiotic relationships with microbes in the soil, and all the good guys in the soil have been hanging out on that root system. You just killed their life force, So if you left it sit there without another set of new roots, they would die or they would leave, and then your plants would go into a dead environment. So instead, by planting immediately into that living root system of the previous cover crop, you are giving your little baby plants a huge boost because they've gone into this beautiful fostering, nurturing community of soil life that wants roots. They really want roots. So they're going to work on your behalf as the farmer. Those soil microbes are going to work to help this baby transplant be as healthy as possible. And that's where the real magic lies. Like, that's where everything has changed for me, to witness that relationship. So Alyssa, do not put your cardboard down until you're ready to plant, is the short answer to that longer answer.
Well, Jennie, I can't thank you enough. This has been so good. So much great information. And I just love the fact that we got to unpack this no-till situation a little bit more, because, it's so funny. It's like, if you're really passionate about organic farming and soil health and that whole stewardship of the land, you've heard that term probably. But if you're not in that culture, you probably have never heard of it. Or if you have, you're like, you're thinking it's,
what is this?
Yeah, it's like, that's just crazy talk. That's crazy talk.
Right.
But it is something that I've seen on a big scale, and I'm excited to hear how well it works on a small scale. And it's amazing. And the long-term effect, as you said, this is going to be a commercial for it now, but it's like, the money you save, the labor you save, the healthier your plants are, the more your production is. It's incredible. And anyway, thank you. I mean, I can't believe we've done this now for almost 2 hours. And
thank you, Scott.
I mean, it's so great. If you haven't heard Jennie's episode, go find an app for podcasts. Go to the website, theflowerpodcast.com. We've created a page with Jennie's episode on it. You can listen straight from the website. Happy American Flowers Week. This is why we have American Flowers Week, is thank you, Deborah Prinzing, but also because of celebrating people like Jennie and the hard work that they do to provide us flowers. So,
and don't forget to check out the Association of Specialty Cut Flower Growers, ASCFG.org.
Absolutely. When you listen to our episode, you learn more about that too, because it's a great organization where you can learn more stuff like this from people like Jennie that are experienced and have gone before you. And so if you're a new flower farmer or grower or steward, whatever you want to call yourself, it's a great place to start, because it's a source of information. So
it really is.
Anyway, thank you so much, Jennie.
Thank you, Scott. All right. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.